farming anyway is a way of life. It's not a job, it's a way of life. If you're going to be a farmer, that's how you have to look at it. And organics, definitely, you have to, from my personal point of view, is you have to work with nature.
Of course, within organic farming, there's a whole spectrum. You're getting some organic farmers who just see that not using chemicals is the answer, but they're still using the industrial model of inputs and outputs in their head. And then you get fertility, that you have to start seeing the farm as a whole, and there has to be a balance there. And that is one of the main principles of a biodynamic farm, that behind this concept you have that it has to be not bringing in inputs from outside, that you see that the whole farm is a kind of whole which has to be in balance, that you have to be able to produce all the feed for your animals off that farm, that they in turn will, if you have the right balance of animals, will produce enough manures of different sorts to maintain and increase the fertility on the farm.
And the important in biodynamics is to have the farm as an organism, so the farm is able to produce all its own manure and able to produce its own fertility.
What people do here, which is much more efficient, of course, is then to use the clover to feed it to your ruminants, to your cattle, to your sheep, to your cows, and they in return give you manure.
It's very important that we all try and go as organic as possible for the health of everyone, and I think to try and reduce the amount of chemicals that we're using, because firstly, if the food is not organic, you're eating a lot of chemicals anyway, and then there's lots of chemicals used to grow that food. So if you can go organic, then it would reduce the damage to the environment that these chemicals and GMO crops cause.
And then on top of that, in biodynamic farming, there is the concept of the preparations, which are, I think, enhancing the manure to a way that the manure is able to really support the plant life, for it to support the animals and the people that live on the farm and feed off the farm. So again, you're creating this cycle of health and sustainability by having the cows eating grass that is suitable for them, that is healthy. And then this manure also goes into the vegetable garden. This manure also goes into producing grain and cereals, which then is fed the people through the farm shop.
If you grow up with organic food, it's a very whole environment that you grow up in, so everything is affecting that food. And I think that makes you very aware of your environment and what you're bringing in and what you're putting out. So I think to learn to grow organically is vital for how you treat the earth, actually. And I think if you experience the goodness that organics brings into your food and to your environment, then you start to see what else needs to be done around you. So I think it opens your eyes.
Our cows are all kept biodynamically, which means that they're fed with hay and silage from our own farm. All of their food comes from our own farm, and it's all grown organically, and we use biodynamic preparations. The cows have their horns, which we feel is very important for their digestive systems, which is also reflected in the milk, and the milk is more nutritious. And they get to be outside all through the year, and in the summer months, spring, summer, autumn, they're out on grass, eating grass, which is the most natural way for a cow. And you can really taste in the milk that it is sort of fresher, more nutritious than a lot of milk which is blended from many different farms and which isn't organic.
I think the future is definitely for people to see not just organic or production, but small scale production, which is much more manageable for people and is able to employ more people and empower more people as to where their food comes from, and to have healthy food and have a stronger connection with their food. Because with industrial farming, we have lost connection with the source of our food and the quality of our food. One person can go to store and buy pepper, doesn't matter what time of the year. We are able to import fruit and vegetables from all over the world, and we don't think about where our food comes from and how much effort goes into it. But in this farm here, it's a small farm, 200-acre farm. The people who are fed from this farm, the people who are in touch with this farm, get much more in touch with their food.
I eat mainly vegetarian, some fish, and I tend to buy from local farmers markets only. I hardly ever enter a supermarket anymore and eat mainly organic food.
Mainly vegetarian. I was vegetarian completely for, it was only 2 years. But I will eat the meat from this farm or from our sister farm, Tablehurst, because it's biodynamic. I know the people looking after the animals, and I know what food they're eating and their environment that they've grown up in. So as long as I know that, I'm happy to eat the meat.
I became vegetarian when I was 6, so I haven't eaten meat in a long time, and I think probably if I wasn't already vegetarian, then I would probably eat organic and biodynamic meat, but I don't really have any need for meat now, so I stay vegetarian.
I was vegetarian as a child, and the whole family was vegetarian, but I only eat organic meat really, or biodynamic.
And we eat vegetarian food and organic as well.
There are methods which are available which can show that we're not just talking about minerals and pure substance, but there are forces in our food and working in nature. And one of those methods was developed by Pfeiffer when he developed the chromatography, and Dr. Kalisko as well with the crystallization method. And by using that method, you can see other than just the chemical constituents of something, but it actually shows a completely different picture depending on how alive or dead it is, if there are forces in that or not. And these pictures are quite objective, and it's absolutely clear. You can take a dead soil and take a sample from that, and one which has been enlivened of that same soil with compost and biodynamic methods, and it creates a completely different picture.
Each farm is a small community of friends and not only colleagues.
For being interested in organic agriculture, and what the farm does here is to do with the fact that you can involve the community in it, and also when you work with biodynamic agriculture or organic agriculture, you're actually producing food that people can trust.
So after I became more interested in organic food and growing my own food and cooking my own food, I got also interested in what isn't organic or the conventional and the use of GMOs. And me personally, I'm completely against using GMOs when you're cooking or eating or anywhere, because they unfortunately are everywhere. The plant is genetically modified. It's missing a vital part of the life of the plant. And when you consume that, you're also missing that vital part of life.
Yeah, I personally don't believe in GMOs because of the health benefits, well, for people and for the planet as a whole. I don't think that gene splicing is an advantage. I haven't seen proof of it getting better yields. The only potential downsides, I think, which is why I avoid it, is that it'll have an effect on us.
GMO food, I think, is a limiting food source. It limits your diet, it limits the variety you can eat, and it makes you very dependent on the seed companies that produce this GMO seed. You can't save the seed, you can't grow next year from the same seed, so for me that raises questions about how good it is for you if it's not fertile enough to produce its own seed that is viable, then to eat food like that. I don't know how good that is for your body.
It's got a terminator gene in it, which means that the the plant is not able to produce seeds for the next generation, how does that affect? So on a material level, on a nutrient level, maybe there is nothing there. It's the same as organic or biodynamic soya. But for me, from a quality point of view, I ask the question, how does it affect my own fertility if I'm eating food that is not able to carry its offspring, is not able to produce the next generation? Is not just only not able to, it's got a gene that is a terminator, that kills it.
The risk of cross-contamination, not only from one plant to the other, but from one plant to bacteria, to other organisms, and so on and so on. It's you don't know what you're unleashing. You have no idea. But one thing is absolutely sure: whatever you do, it's completely irreversible. You will never be able to stop it again. Once it's out there, it will be out there. If it's working out in a bad way, there's no way to reverse this process.
I'm very suspicious of GMOs. I have to say I always try to buy from local farms when I don't get my food from my own farm. And then I know I can trust the food. I know that I can talk to the farmers and see how it was made, and understand the attitude of the people who made it. So that's really important to me. GMOs have clearly, historically they've been associated with using pesticides. They've been associated with infertility of seeds and things like that, and exploitation of farmers. So personally I steer clear of them as much as I can, but also in the UK, as well as in a lot of countries, sometimes unless you are buying organic, it's impossible to know because they don't label that something has got GMOs in it. So that makes it very hard to always be certain.
And the last thing is that it, now time and time again, it proves that GMO doesn't work. Again, it's the question of sustainability. The fact that I sowed maybe a field of GMO corn and it's grown a good crop one year, it doesn't mean that it will grow food every year. A lot of GMO crops have proved to fail. They don't have higher yields, but they still need to have pesticides, herbicides and fungicides. And the result of it is then you get resistant strains like the super weeds, and this just becomes it just becomes an accelerating process. If you get super weeds, then you need to use more poisons, and then the weeds get stronger and stronger, and you're not really solving the problem. The problem is not really solved. While if you create a balanced ecological system and acknowledge the fact that there will be weeds, that there will be pests, that there will be diseases, but to keep it in a balanced way, I think it's much more healthier.
The slightest interest in going back to growing your own food or buying from local growers, you should try and do it, because to me that is the future, basically. When you live in a city and you live just with technology all around you, where life is so fast-paced, you actually gradually completely lose your identity, and you completely lose a sense of what life really is about. So for me, the journey of returning back to nature and to working with the soil and with plants every day has just been an amazing journey. Like, I have had so many moments in the last year or a year and a half where I felt so content and so connected, and where I've really been able to feel joy, just being with color, with sounds of nature. There's so much more than just nutrition that you get from living on the land and working with the land every day. So if you have a chance, then I would say try and leave that bubble where you're completely blinded and numbed by technology, and just try and go back to nature wherever you can find it, really.
I think it's the only way forward. Small scale growing. A lot of small farms that are able to grow and specialize in certain things, but grow also a wide variety of fruit and vegetables. It's also fun, It is. I wouldn't choose it if it wasn't.
I really enjoy farming life. It's very seasonal, it's very rhythmic. You always have the most amazing food right at your fingertips. So I would definitely recommend everyone get into farming, but it is really hard work. And obviously if you're doing farming, then do organic farming because it's so much more rewarding.
So if you are a young person living in a city and you have a desire to find out what it's all about, you just need to go onto websites like the WWOOF websites or HelpX, or there are so many resources on the internet now that can allow you to go and stay on organic farms in your own country even. You don't have to travel around the world, but that you can go and stay at places like that and get an experience volunteering for a few months or even for a few weeks. That would be a great thing to do. Or alternatively, try and find in your own city, if there are allotments available, community projects, community allotments. Like here in the UK we have quite a lot of those projects, and even while I was still working in an office I used to go and volunteer on Sunday afternoons. Try and find some of these projects and allow these projects to help you spark something for you to change your lifestyle and really understand what organics is about, just by eating organically and working with the land.
Hi, this is Bart from the NoPod project at nopod.org. Today we're here at Round Earth Organic Farms with Adam Silverstein. Hi, Adam.
Hi, Bart.
And Adam's going to take us on a tour of his organic farm and teach us some of the tricks that he uses to grow crops without pesticides or fertilizers.
Now, most people, when they keep chickens, they may not even have a chicken coop. But if you do build a chicken coop, you can build a roosting pit and you get all the manure.
Ah, very cool.
So, Ours is kind of fancy, but it doesn't have to be this fancy.
Okay.
It could be a lot simpler. So there's some checks to it. So there's the roosting pit in there. You can see all the manure that's accumulating there. And that is great fertilizer. So basically, if you look around in this room, that is the only spot the chickens have to sit. Even, well, other than the nesting boxes. But if you look like above the nesting boxes, how we did that slope over there, that's so they can't sit up there.
Oh, I see.
So they really spend all their time when they're in here sitting over there.
Okay.
And that's why all the manure accumulates over there.
And then there's a trap door or something?
There's a trap door on the outside of the building you lift up and you can shovel that manure out.
Okay. How long does it take to collect that much?
I mean, that's like a year. That's a year.
Okay.
Of manure. It depends on how many chickens you have. But supposedly they're like 70 to 80% or more of their manure is being dropped right there.
Okay.
But
and that manure is pretty concentrated.
Very concentrated, hot fertilizer. You probably want to let it sit for a while or compost it before you used it.
Okay. And say you composted that for a year, how much coverage would you get out of that much fertilizer?
Well, I mean, usually when I'm spreading it, I'm just spreading like a 1/4 inch, on the surface of the soil, or 500 pounds per acre.
Okay.
Is a ratio, but you don't really use a whole lot of it. So it goes away. It goes a long way.
Let's go around back here and see our trap door.
Yeah, see the trap door.
Okay.
Bulging. Look.
Yep. Nice.
Looks like there's supposed to be another one. There we go.
And then they've got a little door that they can get in and out of here, huh?
Yeah, they do. They've got their own little run that they can use.
And then they probably can't get over the 4-foot fence out here.
No, some of them actually can crawl through the little, I've seen some of them push through the openings.
Okay.
But no, and they probably could fly over it if they really wanted to. But they're not really that interested in escaping. If you were in there chasing them and they took off, they could fly over the edge. Because I haven't clipped their wings or anything to prevent them from flying.
Okay.
So.
And how many chickens do you have?
I think I have about 18 right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. And they eat all of our scraps too. That's one of their big jobs on the farm. All the vegetable scraps. So we're processing the veggies. All the scraps go over there, and then they just wind up chowing down on those. Part of their diet.
Nice.
Gonna have to empty that thing soon. It's bulging.
And you just bring your tractor over with the bucket to...
For the scraps?
Or
for that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would probably just load it right in the tractor and then go dump it in a pile and mix it up every once in a while.
Nice.
Yep.
What other things do you use for soil amendments?
Chicken manure is really the big one that I've used, and I've also hauled in chicken manure from chicken farms around here.
Okay.
The Del Mesa people, they sell this composted chicken manure that I bought like 10 years ago. It's just been sitting in a pile. I also have a lot of deer and elk that come through here in the winter, so they're contributing. You can actually see the pellets right there.
Oh, yeah.
So I leave my veggie crop standing. By the middle of October, we're kind of done with harvest, and the deer and elk start moving down as the hunters move into the high country, and they come down here and they spend a lot of time just chowing down on the remnants of the veggies,
Yep.
and leaving their fertilizer for us.
Very nice.
So that's part of it. And then I'm kind of a big believer in just sort of taking care of your soils. And that if you have healthy soils, that for the most part, most soils have a lot of the nutrients that the plants need. And a lot of times when you have poor growth, it's because plants can't get at the nutrients that they need.
Okay.
So a lot of times just by working your soils, by tilling them, by irrigating them well, in our case irrigation, spreading some manure, you'll start to improve the soil over the years of just the factor of aerating them, just tilling them, growing some kind of a crop, even if you're just growing a cover crop, like a crop that's just to improve the soil.
Okay.
You know, sometimes I'll plant a ryegrass or clover or alfalfa, and then later in the season just mow that down or till that back into the soil.
Okay.
And that process kind of helps rejuvenate the soils. And so part of what I'm doing is I've got, 15 acres, but I'm maybe growing veggies on 5 acres. And the other acreage each year is either fallow, is unused, or it's got some kind of a cover crop that's growing in it to improve the soils. And I sort of have this slow approach. I'm not real big on fertilizers. I kind of feel like the chemical fertilizers tend to pump things up. They increase the amount of water that the plants uptake and the crop gets bigger, but I don't think it necessarily makes it taste better. And I don't think that if you're not in a hurry, then you get the same kind of yields without the chemical fertilizers. It just takes maybe a little bit longer for the plants to reach maturity. But I think they're healthier. I think sometimes if your plants are growing too fast, they're weak. So I kind of have this idea that plants, like people, have an immune system, and that they have a resistance to things like pests. But if they're weak, the pests will have at them. And you see that, I see that in the field, because often the ends of my beds, the far ends, are the part where the pests do the most damage. Now part of that is the pressure coming from outside the field, but part of it is that the plants that are growing at the ends of the beds are always the weakest, because they get trampled as you walk, cut the corners with the tractor, or they don't get weeded as well, or they don't get watered as well because they're at the edge of the irrigation set. So those plants are weaker to begin with. And then that weakness translates into them having more pressure from pests.
Huh.
Interesting. Well. I got that from one of my teachers who was really into the whole immune system and human beings, and he kind of had this idea that plants have immunities, and when they're weak, and you definitely see that as plants start to decline, the pests kind of will move in. The other big thing that we're doing out here for pests really is not monocropping. I do have some crops like corn. Maybe we'll have a 1/4 acre of it. But for the most part, what you see is a little patch of this, a row of that. You see some flowers out in the middle of the field that are mostly just grown for the birds that like them. There's a couple of crops that I grow, like dill and cilantro, that I will let go to flower, and those flowers will attract beneficial insects.
Okay.
But the big thing about having the diversity is just that you're reducing the habitat for the bad insects for your pests. So if you have 10 acres of corn, and then you have a pest that likes corn, they're just going to flourish in there and go crazy in your corn. But if you just have a little patch, and then you have something else, and you have something else, there's different pests that like each different crop. So you're sort of giving them less territory to move in on. And at least in our climate, a lot of the pests actually, they immigrate in each year. They don't overwinter here. So each year they have to come find you. And if you've just got a little bit of this and a little bit of that, it's harder for them to find you.
Very nice.
Yeah. And then, of course, you're putting yourself at less risk in terms of failure. If you have one crop that fails out of 25 crops that you're growing, it's not as much of a problem as if you're just growing 2 crops and you lose one of them. So that's another way that diversity helps.
So it sounds like diversity is a big part of your strategy all the way around.
It is, and also for nutrients, for pests, for diseases, soil diseases. So diversity also plays into rotation, where you're not growing the same crop in the same land over and over again each year. And when you grow the same crop in the same soils, you run into 2 problems. One is the crop uses the same nutrients, and it needs the same fertilizers each year, so it's going to keep sucking that out of the soil. And the second thing is the diseases do overwinter in our soil. So if you get some kind of a fungus disease that's affecting your tomatoes, and then you keep planting tomatoes in that same soil, you're going to have that same disease. So in that case, we're trying to rotate different plants, and we're talking about the different plant families. So tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and potatoes are all in the same plant family. So they're in the Solanaceae family, and they will all, because they're in the same family, that means they're going to have the same nutrients that they need and draw from the soil. They're going to have the same pests. They're going to have the same diseases. So for that reason, those crops, I would never plant them in the same spot in the following year, the subsequent year.
That makes sense.
If I had eggplants in a spot the following year, none of those crops could go in. And there's really only like 5 families of food that we grow for almost all of our food, for the vegetables anyway. There's, the Solanaceae, which I just mentioned. There's the curcubits, which is like cauliflower, I'm sorry, cucumber, squash, winter squash. Those are all curcubits, pumpkins. There's different subspecies, but they're all related. They all have the same pests, same diseases, same nutrient needs. Then there's the Cruciferaceae, which is like or brassicas, they're called. Broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage. All those are in that same family. Let's see. What other vegetable crops are there? There's the alliums, which is like the onions, the garlic, shallots, leeks, all those other oniony things.
Stronger smelling root crops.
Yeah, that was 3 plant families. I'm probably forgetting. Okay, so the lettuces are all in one plant family, but I can't remember what the name of that family is. I'll have to go look. I've got a book that's a little more of a guide that would give us like all the information. But the idea is that each, there really aren't that many different plant families that we have. I think it's just 5 that we grow vegetables in. And that each one of those plant families, as you get to know them as a farmer, they really are very similar. Broccoli grows very similar to cauliflower. They like the same conditions. They use the same nutrients, same pests, same diseases. So really, that plays into a lot. The diversity is also about rotating and having all those things kind of mixing up each year.
Very nice.
Okay.
No, this is good. This is exactly what we need.
The other thing we do for pests is we use this remade material. That's going to be hard to come by in a place where you can't just order stuff through the mail. But that is like a fabric. It's probably something make very similar. But like we have problems with a certain pest that gets on our soft-leafed, like the tutsoys and the bok choys and stuff. It's the flea beetle will just eat those up. So we cover those crops with this very thin kind of fabric. It's an agricultural fabric called Rime, and it allows the air and the water and the sunlight to penetrate, but it doesn't let the bugs get through.
Okay. Do you have some of that around we could look at?
Yeah, we can look at a piece of that. And I think, it's very similar to like what a very fine, like muslin cloth, like a cheesecloth would be.
Okay.
So it's probably something people have seen, but maybe that it's not very accessible. But it's like amazingly effective. It's the barrier method. It's just amazing. You just cover something, and you have to be a little careful because if you've got fruits in there that need to get pollinated, you're keeping your pollinators away too.
Okay.
So if you need to have bees that are going to spread the pollen, then you can't keep it covered all the time. But if you're not worried about it, if you're just growing a leafy crop where there's no fruits, then you don't have to worry about that.
And the beetles don't crawl around the fabric or something like that?
I pin it down, but these flea beetles actually, they move by hopping.
Okay.
So they don't really crawl.
Huh.
And there's some that get under there anyway, and there's some under there before you start. But it's just much, much less.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what it sounds like, is that you're never going to eliminate your pests on an organic farm.
Right.
But doing everything you can to interrupt their life cycle.
Yep. And, some people are, we have the benefit of growing in a desert climate, so we don't really have the kinds of pest pressures that some people have. But like our organic fruit tree growers, the apple growers, they have to spray really regularly to keep the codling moths from moving in. And they're spraying some kind of an oil that has some kind of a plant extract in it that's toxic to those bugs,
Okay.
And it's organic because it's made with organic source materials, but it's still sort of very intensive. It requires a lot of intervention.
Yep.
Mostly what I'm doing doesn't require a lot of intervention. I'm mostly succeeding by the diversity, like I mentioned, and volume, and also choosing to grow here where there's not a lot of pests.
Very nice.
Yeah. I'll keep walking a little bit. Let's see.
Do you bring in beneficial insects?
I have before, but for the most part I've kind of stopped doing that. It's really most effective when you're in like a greenhouse and you can keep them from flying away. And they do sell, like, you can get these bags of ladybugs and you go and you spread them, and they're ravenous when they come, and then you just watch them go to work. But usually a few days later they're kind of gone.
Okay.
They kind of move on unless there's something great about it. And mostly what I try to do is just, again, create that habitat for them. So, like, I grow these breaks of dill and cilantro, and the ladybugs are drawn to that, and then they'll go out and find other food.
Okay, so dill and cilantro are your big favorites for attracting.
They're my big favorites. They're in the Umbrophilerae family. That was one of the family we didn't talk about. The carrots are in that family. What else is in that family? Umbrophilerae. It's they all make a similar kind of flower. It's like an umbrella. That's where umbel comes from. And those flower heads, we can actually. I'll show you some here. Those flower heads are what's very attractive to the beneficial insects. A lot of lacewings on them, and ladybugs. That's dill.
Okay.
And that's the classic umbel family. So there's quite a few plants that have that same shaped. Sometimes they're white, sometimes they're yellow, but they always have that kind of open up in a big head like that. These are potatoes here.
Okay. And do you plant the dill in with other crops directly?
No, it's usually on its own, but what happens is it goes to seed every year.
Okay.
So every year it kind of just comes up wherever it, and if I don't weed it out, then it's there.
Okay.
In this case, I specifically left this. I mowed over the tops of most of this potatoes to knock the weeds down, but I didn't mow this because I knew people would want dill for their pickling projects.
I see.
So, and it was like the only dill I had left in the field.
Ah, nice. That worked out.
There's some more, but these were some big heads at the time.
What do we have growing over here?
This is cauliflower. This is some of that crazy purple cauliflower.
Oh, nice.
A couple heads that didn't get picked in there.
Yep.
That was a green cauliflower we did this year. And we grew the orange cauliflower and, of course, the white cauliflower. That kind of diversity is more just about people enjoying the different colors than anything else. Because they're all in the same plant family. They all have the same needs and everything.
Yep.
Cabbages in here. You can see our sprinkler line. Things like broccoli and cabbage and cauliflower all like water. They like to be watered all day long, every day. You can water them. In the heat of the summer here, you'll always see these sections on. The sprinklers are on here. So that's one other thing that happens that works against the diversifying theory, is that because of my different irrigation needs, I've got to kind of clump things together that want the same kind of irrigation.
Okay.
So I'll clump together these brassicas, even though ideally maybe they would be more separated. These aren't all the brassicas that I have. There's some over there, and there's some out there, so it's not like the whole thing, but there's a big clump of them here, and that's for a reason. It's because they all like to get watered all the time.
And that's probably your most water-intensive type of crop.
Mm-hmm. That and like lettuces get watered a lot. Whereas something like a tomato or a squash maybe would prefer, if you didn't water it as much, likes to dry out really between waterings. At the end of the year, people often will just stop irrigating those crops and just let them dry.
Okay.
So they'll ripen up their fruits more.
I see.
This is all sort of fallow, but it was planted in crops this year, and then it's just been dug up, and I haven't had a chance to till it down yet.
Nice.
Got a lot of rocks in our soil. That is always a lot of work on your equipment, and it's a big project in the spring, but the rocks also indicate that we have good mineral content in our soil, because our soils are being formed when there's a lot of volcanic activity in the area. And amazingly enough, if you go down to Hansen Mesa, one mesa below us, there are no rocks. No rocks. Like, none. Like, if they want rocks, they have to come up here and get them. And, around here, you see, you can't quite see them, but there's rock walls on the edge of every field, because people have been pulling rocks out for 100 years, and they're not done. There's still more rocks.
And so you've got a much better mineral content than they do down at Hansen Mesa.
Yes. Their soil is much more sterile. It's sandier. Yeah. So they have more to do in terms of fertility.
Okay.
So, but I just noticed the rocks. That's why why I mentioned it.
Yep.
Because every time you till, you get a bunch of rocks coming up. The conditions change. You can have things come up that weren't growing there before just because you've changed the conditions. So over like several years of farming, you'll start to see different types of weeds that you didn't have before, just because they're sort of proliferating in your soil.
Okay, and what types of things do you do to deal with weeds?
Weeds we really cultivate by hand. It's all done mechanically by hand. I do a little bit of tractor cultivation on my bigger crops like the corn, where I can get the tractor set up and tear through there with blades behind my wheels and get a lot of the weeds that way. But for most of the crops we're weeding by hand. We use a hand hoe that's like a stirrup blade hoe. Okay. It's like a thin blade and kind of a slightly flattened, it's not completely flat, but it's got like a little bit of a bend to it. You can just use it in this pulling motion towards you. The biggest thing that I've found about weeding is that the timing is really critical. You have to weed before the weeds get too big, or you wind up doing a lot more work. And so getting to the weeds at just the right point is really important in terms of being efficient. Also, the moisture level of the soil is really important when you're weeding. So in our climate where it's dry and we can control the moisture level, I try to make sure that the soil that we're cultivating, hoeing, is not soaking wet, because the mud will just clog up your tool. You also don't want it to be super, super dry, because the soil just gets hard when it's dry. But it's got to be kind of somewhere in between, a little bit of moisture. And then right after we cultivate, we want the weeds that have been cut up to just bake in the sun, so we don't want to irrigate for another day or two after we weed.
Okay.
And then we can start to irrigate again. Where you're in a climate where you're relying on rain, you have to really be on top of, today's the day, we've got to weed today because the conditions are right. So the weeding is most effective when the conditions are perfect. The weeds are at the right height, the moisture level's right. So to me, being really successful about weeding is just keeping at it all season, kind of starting early. I start when the weeds are just like tiny, tiny weeds and you can barely see them, and we just start. And it's very quick, you just weed a whole bed in almost no time because there's not much. You don't even see much, and it's very quick, but still it makes a difference. So I just kind of try to start early and stay on top of it.
How often do you weed?
Well, it's kind of like a part of our season. Like early in the season, we're doing greenhouse work and field prep work. Then we're getting to planting big time. And usually by the middle of May, we're almost done with our planting and we're really getting into weeding. And then we have a period of about a month and a half where that's all we do. And I hire a crew. I bring people in to help us with weeding because it's a big labor need that we suddenly have. And then it kind of goes on. It kind of trickles in, and then it gets really big, and then it kind of goes on for almost the rest of the season. It kind of slows down towards the end because we stop weeding certain crops, and other crops we have to weed again, or maybe a second or third time.
Okay, and what do we have here?
These are artichokes. This is the rest of the artichokes. They're really kind of finishing up. Here's the broccoli. Got some wild turkeys out there. I don't know if you can see the turkeys.
Oh yeah.
They like to eat the bugs too.
And they don't tromp on the crops too bad, huh?
No, we did notice some damage in our lettuces this year, but not too much. They really move quite a bit. They don't tend to stop and do too much concentrated damage.
And how many turkeys do you have out here?
I have no idea. There are several groups. They're wild. Probably 50.
Are there any artichokes? Oh yeah, here are a couple on the plant. You can see the ladybugs all over them.
Yeah, was I telling you about that? This is what you see here is really cool. You get the ladybugs that are eating the aphids. And the other thing you get is, I don't see it so much right now, but you get ants that farm the aphids. The ants, there's an ant, they bring the aphid eggs up and they put them on the plants, and then they come back and they harvest the little baby aphids to eat.
Okay.
And then the ladybugs kind of key in on it, and there's a lot of wasps that come in too, and I mean, these plants, right now, I think it's just kind of cooled down, so it's slowed down, but in the middle of the summer, it was just like crazy. You could barely walk in here. It was just insects everywhere.
And so ladybugs are pretty much your primary beneficial around here, it seems like.
They're a big beneficial for sure.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of them in here.
There's a lot. The celery in our climate tends to get really tough. So what I'm trying to do here is hill it up. I'm trying to use a tractor to bury these things with dirt. And then that'll sort of blanch them and make them turn white and tender, hopefully.
Nice. I can almost smell the peanut butter and raisins.
Alright, we're almost at the end here.
It's good.
Talk a little bit about drip tape. So this whole section here is all being irrigated with this drip tape. And this is like the most efficient way to irrigate. The water's just pushed down into the tube, and there's little holes that are kind of pre-drilled into this seam that allows the water to dribble out. And so for the whole run, there's like a little bit of water dribbling out every 12 inches, and the lines stay on for a long time, like 5 or 6 hours, until it's saturated. It's very efficient. You're not watering, in between the beds. So I've got one row of crop, and then I've got a 5 or 6 foot space, and then another row of crop, and I've just got water going where the crop is. So also less weeding, because you're not watering your weeds. And also a lot of these crops, they don't really like the overhead water as much. They don't like to be watered on their leaves. So anyway, that's drip tape. Irrigation is just a huge thing out here in the desert. So I don't know, it probably doesn't apply to other places where it rains all the time. But for us, that's a big technological innovation.
And so you've got some main pipes, and then you keep branching down, and the drip tape's obviously at the end of the whole chain.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a really big 4-inch main pipe that's buried. And then that comes up into these risers every 40 feet. And then on these risers, I can either go with a sprinkler line, where I'll have a sprinkler head every 30 feet, or I can go into a PVC pipe and then go into the drip tapes.
Okay, so it goes to PVC up at the other end there?
No, the PVC would be down. I could just like this here.
Okay.
I can go here, I'll tell you. This would be for drip instead of for
I see.
sprinklers.
Gotcha.
And then from the PVC it goes into that drip tape.
Okay. Do you have one of the drip tapes starting off from the PVC somewhere?
Yeah. Let's see. It's hard to see it.
Okay.
That's what it looks like.
Wow.
And all I really do is looks like that one wasn't working. It's a very simple system. I drill a hole in the PVC that's slightly smaller than the outside diameter of this tube.
Okay.
And I cram the tube in there. And then I poke a hole in the drip tape and cram the tube in there. And that's all my whole technology.
And then you just pinch off both ends of the drip tape.
Yeah, I just hide it in a knot.
Okay.
They do make special fittings for all this stuff. They make a special fitting for this part. They make a special fitting for tying off the end. They make a special fitting for this. I just learned this kind of cheap way of doing it, where you don't have to have any fittings.
If it works, that's what matters.
Great. And at a certain point in the season, you can't check the line anymore. When we first fill it up, we go down, make sure it's not leaking anywhere, make sure there's no tears or whatever. At this point in the season, if I wanted to make sure it was working, I would basically just go to the other end. And if there was water at the other end, I'd be pretty confident there'd be water dripping out the whole way.
Okay.
Sweet corn, very productive. Everyone here loves to eat sweet corn. Would also make great silage crop for a cow. You know, the cow would eat the whole thing.
And I know that most types of sweet corn for modern farming have been bred so that there's only one ear per stalk of corn.
That's probably true.
Is that how this corn is, or?
No, this one will produce a couple per.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what variety of corn is this? Do you know?
This one's called Delectable.
Okay.
I mean, it is a hybrid, but it's not like genetically modified. It's just a cross between two types. Carrots.
Oh yeah.
Sunflowers. The sunflowers are really just for selling for cut flowers. I've got a nice fall crop of carrots here. And we're just kind of picking at those. They'll go for a couple weeks, a few weeks maybe. A lot of different varieties. Oops, I'm in your light.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and pull one out here.
I know, I see you. You might just pull the top. Here you go.
Okay.
These are the little guys. These are cute. These are the little, like, Thumbelinas.
Nice.
But some of them are bigger. Just the type.
Do you have different varieties in here?
Yeah, a lot of different varieties. So, here's my little label. It'll say what the varieties are. Atlas, Danvers, and Nantes. Those are the 3 varieties in this bag.
Okay.
So each bag's got different varieties. This is the Yellow Sun here. There it is. Real pretty. Oh, come on. I need the water, and then they'll come out a little easier. Sometimes we have to bring the pitchfork out, actually, to get these guys out.
Nice.
Depends on the variety.
There you go. Yeah, look at that. That's a healthy looking carrot.
Mm-hmm. Lots of carrots still to be picked. There's some basil and scallions.
Okay.
There's the rest of the beans. Those were highly productive, and we had to just stop picking them because we just kind of ran out of labor.
So these are onions. You were showing us one of the onions you just picked here.
Yep.
It's a
and
Walla
I was
Walla.
saying that I plant them from little onion transplants. So someone else grows them from seed. They probably start them in the fall. They overwinter them, and then when I buy them in the spring for transplanting, they're just tiny little onion shoots.
Nice.
And this was like 2,000.
Okay. And what is this? Maybe an eighth of an acre or something like that?
No, not even. No, it would be well about 24 beds per acre, and it was just 2 beds, so like a 1/12 of an acre.
Okay.
Yeah. It's that easy.
Here we've got a bunch of lettuce.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything tricky about the lettuce?
Well, in our climate, to keep the lettuce tender through the summer, I plant it over and over and over again.
Okay.
That's the big secret, is just always having a fresh crop. So I have a lot of land here, so I till up a new section and plant a new section of salad about every week in the summer.
Okay.
Maybe 2 weeks go by at the longest.
That's a good trick.
And then we'll harvest the lettuce, and then when it's starting to get a little bit too big, we're already ready to move on to the next patch.
Okay. And so your greenhouse is mainly for starting stuff?
Well, we've got a few. We've got one greenhouse that's heated, and we'll fire that up in the end of February, beginning of March, and that's for growing our long season crops like tomatoes and peppers and eggplants that need a really long growing season, so we have to start those really early.
Okay.
Then this hoop house and then that hoop house out in the field there are both kind of designed for providing extra heat during the growing season. So certain crops in our climate, such as melons, do not really ripen up very well because it's so cool here in the evenings.
Okay.
So by having that plastic layer, even though it's open at the end and open on the sides, it will retain a huge amount of heat. Plus, of course, it's much hotter in there during the day.
Okay, so you basically just have 2 tractors here on the farm.
This is a big tractor for tilling and a little bit of the cultivating, like I said. And this one is the little cultivating tractor. It's a 1949 Alice Chalmers Model G. Got the engine in the back.
Okay.
Which is a nice feature so that you can see your crops when you're sitting looking at your crops. And in the front we've got these gooseneck sweep blades. And these are set up to weed the 3 rows that we grow in our beds. So these blades work the soil, the wheel and this back are kind of rolling along, floating along.
Okay.
These brackets allow the blades to move up and down.
I see.
And then this is cutting into the soil. So the idea is this is just below the surface of the soil. This area here is being left untouched in between those 2 blades. But this is being cultivated, this is being cultivated. And so there's 3 lines that are left, 3 parallel lines, and those are where the crops are.
Nice.
So those 3 lines would line up with these 3 markers. So when we're planting, I will mark the fields with these, and that'll give us 3 furrows. And then we'll drop our transplants that we've grown, like our broccoli transplants or our lettuce transplants, into those 3 furrows.
Okay.
And we can come back with the front part and weed it without hitting, if you're not hitting one row, you're not hitting the other 2 rows.
Right.
Because they're parallel. They're not straight, they're parallel. And then also with the big tractor, the other thing that I do that we didn't talk about is I do some direct seeding with that. So I've got 3 seeders that I put on the bar on the back, and I can fill those up with carrot seeds like I saw out there, or corn, or beets, or it's a whole bunch of different crops that I direct sow. Peas, beans, all those things. I'll dump those seeds in the seeder and then drive down, and then that's putting the seed right below the surface of the soil. Again, the spacing on those 3 rows would match the spacing of these and the spacing of my cultivators.
Okay.
So I'm able to go back and do the cultivating.
Nice.
We still cultivate everything by hand, but this allows us to come through very quickly. I can, in a couple of hours, go cultivate a whole acre. And, it's not 100% thorough, but it's a 80, 90% kind of thing, and then come back by hand to finish the job off.
Well, it seems like a neat little tractor.
That's cool.
Let's go see your double digger.
Okay. So this is a spader. It has just a series of 8 blades. Mine does. They come in different widths. And what happens is the blades make a motion kind of like this. They chop straight down, and then they kind of loop back. They're making a circular motion. And what happens is they're chopping up the soil as you move forward very, very slowly with the tractor. They're slicing off like maybe a ½ inch or an inch of a trench that you're working, and they go down quite far, 10 or 12 inches, maybe even more. And then as they make their backward motion, they catch the top half of that tilling depth, maybe 5 or 6 inches, and they fling it backwards against this plate.
Okay.
And the soil, if the moisture content's right, will hit that plate, pulverize, and fall back, making a really nice seed bed on top, just like you get with a rototiller. Now, if it's too dry, it'll be, it won't pulverize. If it's too wet, it turns it into muddy chunks. So the moisture content really is very critical on this implement.
Okay.
But if the conditions are right, what you wind up with is, you wind up with soil that you can stick your arm down to your elbow. It's loose down that far. The bottom half of that tilling depth has been loosened. The top half has been actually blended more. They don't get mixed together.
Okay, whereas a rototiller would just mix them.
Yeah, it mixes them. But part of what you're doing with the whole thing I was talking about, like the life of the soil and trying to keep your soils healthy, most of the life of your soil is just in those top couple of inches. That's where all the biological activity, where the oxygen is permeating, the worms are doing their cycling up and down. So when you're rototilling or tilling down 8 or 10 inches and you're sort of blending it all up, it's not that you're killing it, but you're losing sort of your concentration of your life. So if you can try to avoid that, it's better.
Okay. Good tip.
Yeah. And it's a great tool, and they have come down in price quite a bit since I bought mine, and they make them in all different sizes, so you can get them even as small as like for a Foster-type rototiller.
Oh, okay.
They have them for like a BCS rototiller. The fancier one, but I could never get its. You can see it's kind of pulled apart. I could never get its chain to work. I got it. I used it for several years, And then one year I spent all this time. I had Jim Harden like manufacture these pieces, these teeth for it for me, and I could never get that. It would work, but then it would get stuck. And I finally gave up on it. So I need to actually get a bigger one. But this is the one I'm using now. It's pretty small is my main problem with it. You know, I can only hold like 3 or 4 buckets worth, and then I got to drive out there and drive back.
Right.
The one I'm driving a lot more. But it's chain driven, so it's more reliable.
Right. Yeah, sometimes the old technology works better.
Yeah.
And then does something, I guess, on the bottom of the bed there, that all moves and moves it to the back.
That whole thing moves back, yeah. There's like as the chain runs, there's like a beater arm somewhere that pushes this big wheel around.
Okay.
Just like one notch at a time, and that turns the chain.
And is this all driven from the tires?
All driven from the tires. Super old technology.
And do you have control over various aspects of it with these levers?
Supposedly, although mine is not working that great, so I just basically have on and off.
Okay.
But supposedly, one of them would control like how much was letting out, and one of them would control how fast it was moving.
I see.
But for me, it's just kind of either on or off.
Yeah, neat piece of equipment. How old would you guess that is?
I don't know. 50 years maybe? The guy I bought it from was like 90 or 80 something. You know?
Yep.
Probably the easiest $500 he ever made.
There you go.
All right, well, that was great, Adam. Had fun, and I'm sure we learned a lot today, so really appreciate it. Until we see you next time.
Great. Thanks for coming out.
Yep. Thank you.